In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of Finding God. We are still on chapter 56 with Surah As-Safat, those ranged in ranks. And last week I covered up till verse 74. So today I'll be I'll be starting with the verse 74 and then continuing on till maybe 114 or something. I'll be covering the stories of two great prophets that have existed in Abrahamic religions and are part of human civilization as great historical figures. Noah and Abraham. So last week we were talking about the end of those who were warned but did not heed the warning, and except those who except the chosen slaves of God, the faithful, obedient, and believers of Islam or Christianity or whichever faith is preaching the message. We were discussing this last week. So now we're moving to the second section of the chapter. The first is Day of Judgment, human behavior, recapping, current times, so on and so forth. And now would be a series of stories. We start with Noah, then Abraham, then Elias and Moses, then Jonas, and then maybe one more, I think. And it will recap, and then it will be a final wrap up. That's how the chapter is organized. The first third, then the stories, and then the final third. So now we're finally moving to the second section, and I'll be starting with verse 75. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, Bismillah. And indeed Noah invoked us, and we are the best of those who answer the request. Yes, you are. And we rescued him and his family from the great distress, the drowning, the great flood. Many great films have been made about it. Not many great films, but I particularly loved the Russell Crowe version of Noah, the Darren Aronofsky directorial work. I know a lot of people close to me who did not appreciate it, but I thoroughly liked it. And in his progeny, them we made the survivors: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And these names you can find in the other Old and New Testament as well. And left for him a goodly remembrance among the later generations. Salam, or peace be upon Noah from us among the Alameen, the mankind, the jinn, and all that exists. I just want to see what the Arabic of this is. Salam ala. Oh, okay. So, literally the exact translation. So, God is expressing blessings upon Noah. That's exactly what's happening here. Like, peace be upon Noah. That's what's being said. Verily, thus we rewarded the Muhsinun, the good doers, and this will be elaborated in a great amount of detail when I cover chapter 2, which is a gigantic, maybe the largest chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah. Once I'll cover that. But for now, once it says verse 2, I'm going to discuss what it means to be a good doer. Verily, he, Noah, was one of our believing slaves. Then we drowned the others, the disbelievers, the polytheists. And it's a wonderful story, and I think it was somewhat reenacted in Evan Almighty, I think 2005, 7, 8 film with Morgan Freeman and Steve Carell. The Americanized version, obviously, but it's a fine adaptation of how, if somebody comes to me today and says, look, a great flood is coming, help me build an ark, even I, a man of faith, would be like, who do you think you are? You're not Noah. What are you talking about? So it's understandable that people would argue against it, but if your heart is open to it, I believe you always end up seeing the light. And if your heart isn't, then all the light in the world can't guide you. So maybe that's the case. And verily among those who followed Noah's way, Islam was Abraham, or Ibrahim, as we say. When he came to his Lord with a pure heart, attached to God alone and none else, worshipping none but God alone, true Islam, pure from the filth of polytheism. Yes, because he existed in that time. There was a pantheon. When he said to his father and his people, what is it that which you worship? Is it a falsehood, aliha, other than God, that you desire? Aliha is God's, or ilah, as we've seen. Other than God that you desire, then what think you about the Lord of the Alameen, the mankind, jinn, and all that exists? The story is a bit more detailed than that. There's a whole story about him leaving an axe on the largest idol, because they were idol worshippers. They worshipped a pantheon, a polytheistic pantheon of idols. So, but perhaps it will be elaborated later. And he said, "Verily, I am sick with plague." He did this. Oh, exactly. He did this trick to remain in their temple of idols, to destroy them, and not to accompany them to the pagan feast. So they turned away from him and departed for fear of the disease. Understandable. Now, Abraham was a while ago. If Muhammad, peace be upon him, was 1500 years ago, and Jesus was 2000 years ago, and Moses was a long, long time before that, like 3000 or so before that, and so forth, then Abraham was much, much further. So if he says, "Oh, I have a plague," people will say, okay, just do your thing, right? Then he turned to the Aliha, their gods, and said, "Will you not eat of the offering before you?" Now, this is a direct contestation of current polytheistic religions, one of which I'm quite familiar with because I grew up in the neighboring nation state and I have good friends from that. And this is a debate that happens all the time between the monotheistic and polytheistic religions, because the monotheistic religions rarely, if ever, or maybe they have, the Abrahamic in particular, well, no, the Christians do it now too, but in the correct form of the book, there's no idol. But now we do see Jesus on the cross. We do see that. So perhaps that has changed. But in Islam, there isn't. And as far as I know, in Judaism, there isn't as well. But for the pantheon or polytheistic religions, there's typically idols. There's typically figurines that you worship. And the very common critique is, well, you put a pot of milk in front of a certain god. Are they going to drink it, or is it an offering? Is it being received? If it isn't being received, is it your fault, or is it the common sense argument that this is an idol that you've created? Maybe that God exists somewhere, but you've created this idol. What is this all about? So this is the Quran. The Quran is obviously going to take the Abrahamic monotheistic position. So obviously it's going to make this argument, which Abraham did as well. Then he turned to their gods and said, "Will you not eat of the offering before you? What is the matter with you that you speak not?" Yes. Then he turned upon them, striking them with his right hand. Then they, the worshippers of idols, came towards him, hastening. He said, "Worship you that which you yourselves carve?" Exactly what I just said. "Well, God has created you, and what you make." They said, "Build from him a building." Build for him, sorry, a building. It is said that the building was like a furnace, and throw him into the blazing fire. Okay, burn this guy. Fair enough. So they plotted a plot against him, but we made them the lowest. And he said, after his rescue from the fire, "Verily I am going to my Lord, he will guide me. My Lord, grant me offspring from the righteous." Before I continue, and it's summarized in the Quran. Perhaps it's covered more in the New and Old Testament, but the story that I can share you of Nimrod and Abraham, that Abraham was thrown into the flame, and before being thrown, he obviously beseeched God for protection, and the flame went cold. That's the legend. That's the myth. That's the story that we believe. The flame went cold. In Urdu, we have, my mom has taught me this verse, this line of poetry. "Bekhatar kood pada, aatish namrud mein ishq, aql hai mehbit basha labe baangi," which means he dove with abandon into the flames, while the mental faculties are still considering. He dove for the love of God, while the mental faculties are still considering whether to jump or not. So that's the story. And it is said that the flame were turned into a bed of flowers. That's the belief. But here it's just summarized. And now he begs for an offspring, so we gave him glad tidings of a forbearing boy. I suppose that's Isaac. And when his son, was old enough to walk with him, he said, "Oh, my son, I have seen in a dream that I am slaughtering you, offering you in sacrifice to God. So look what you think." He said, "Oh, my father, do that which you are commanded. Inshallah, if God wills, you shall find me as of the Asabrun, the patient." Inshallah, it's lovely to see it written in the Quran. It's one of the most common things Muslims say. Um, then, when they had both submitted themselves to the will of God, and he had laid him prostrate on his forehead, or on the side of his forehead for slaughtering, we called out to him, O Abraham, you have fulfilled the dream. Verily, thus do we reward the Muhsinun, the good doers. Verily, that indeed was a manifest trial. So you were being tested. O great friend, O great man of God, is still being tested. It's so interesting. And we ransomed him with a great sacrifice. Kabish, a ram. A ram has always had such incredible significance in religions and in rituals. It's so interesting to me. And we left for him a goodly remembrance among the later generations. Salam, peace be upon Abraham. So it's a repetition. First Noah, now Abraham. Thus indeed do we reward the Muhsinun. Verily he was one of our believing slaves. Yes, he was. And we gave him the glad tidings of Isaac, a prophet from the righteous. We blessed him and Isaac, and of their progeny are some that do right and some that plainly wrong themselves. Before I continue, the story of Abraham slaughtering Isaac is that Gabriel, Archangel Gabriel, or perhaps could be another angel, but as far as I recall, is Archangel Gabriel replaced the son while the father was about to slaughter him. He's running the knife over his neck, and it was replaced by the will of God. And then it was revealed, oh, this was also a test, and you have passed the test because you're a true believer. Imagine being ready to sacrifice your own child because you saw in a dream that is what the Lord wants. And imagine the son having so much trust and faith in his father to say, if that is your dream, do it. You'll find me to be of the patient. I don't know if we have anything like that today. Perhaps we may have some variations of such stories, but this is truly a biblical, a magnificent tale, a love between father and son. I think I should stop here. Verse 113, that's where I'm stopping. Because then we start talking about Moses, and then we start talking about other friends. So incidentally, it was just a very, 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 very short story today. Normally I go on for longer, but that's just what ended up happening. I don't know what my hair is doing. So how it's typically, I'll fix this later. How it typically recaps after this is you talk about Noah, then you talk about Abraham, then Moses, then Aaron, then Jonas, and then Elijah, I think, and one more, and then you do a bit of recap. What is it saying to Prophet Muhammad at that time when he's receiving this message? It is saying to him, look, you're not the only one. There have been others before you. This that you're facing with your people is incredibly common. So don't worry about it. This is bound to happen. Don't worry. Steadfast. And look what happened to all of them. Abraham and his tests, and Noah and his tests, and Moses and his tests, and so on and so forth. So fear you not. Stay on this path, and you're on the path of the righteous. I think essentially the Quran is to be spread across the world, but B also it's some sort of a support or counseling for Prophet Muhammad at that time in particular, where God is trying to show him support, successfully showing him support with the verses like, look, don't worry about this. Look, don't do that. No, that's perfectly fine. All those things are part of what God is doing for Prophet Muhammad. And one great example of doing that is by saying, look, all these people before you, they went through the same thing. So you going through it is nothing worse or better. It's the same thing. He's making it relevant and relative and understandable. Relatable, sorry, that's the word I was using. He's making it relatable for Prophet Muhammad. He's saying, no, it happens. It has happened. It will happen. Every time somebody comes with the truth, we've even seen it after Prophet Muhammad, with great scientists and great discoverers who are chastised with great tellers of truth, even today, who are chastised or metaphorically burned at the stake. So I think God was reminding Prophet Muhammad that this is human nature and steadfast. So I'm going to stop here, and next week I'll pick up from exactly verse 114, talk about Moses and Aaron and then the other prophets, and then the week after we'll finish it up. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend. Take care.